I hate crime. Larry Kent, Private Investigations.
It's the Paramount Insurance Company.
Sorry, I've got some.
I'm looking for the claims manager, Miss Lawrence.
Oh?
Miss Lawrence would like to see you.
About what?
I believe she wants to engage your services.
Then ask her to ring me, will you?
I'm sorry, Mr. Kent. She's at an important conference. But she would like to see you at 11. Shall I tell her you'll be here?
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Do you know where our offices are located?
Yeah, see you at 11.
Thank you. Goodbye.
So long. I was at the Paramount Insurance Claims Department at 2 minutes after 11.
Mr. Kent?
Yeah?
Miss Lawrence has been waiting for you.
Oh, too bad.
Now, if you'll just come this way.
I did. She led me through a couple of offices, came to a door with gold leaf spelling out, Ruth Lawrence, Claims Manager.
Come in.
Mr. Kent is here, Miss Lawrence.
Oh, send him in, Miss Morgan.
Very well. There you are, Mr. Kent.
Thanks, sweetheart.
Have a chair, Mr. Kent.
Right.
You're 3 minutes late.
Well, there was a blonde at the reception desk. I had to ask her how to get here, among other things. What's on your mind, Miss Lawrence?
A job you might be able to perform.
What's the job?
Now, first, as a private detective, I assume that you treat all cases confidentially.
That's part of my business.
You're an American?
Yeah?
Then why did you come to Australia? Trouble?
Look, Miss Lawrence, I didn't come here to be pumped.
I like to know as much as I can about the people I hire.
Then go get yourself another boy. Good morning, Miss Lawrence.
Oh, wait.
Yeah?
Your attitude suits this particular job I have in mind. Sit down again, please.
No more questions?
No more personal What's the matter? Why do you look at me like that?
I was just wondering what would happen if you'd smile.
Why should I?
Well, it'd break down your businesslike front and probably make you look feminine.
Sex, Mr. Kent, has no place in business.
Then I must be in the wrong business.
Shall I begin, Mr. Kent?
She was a glacier. A lovely, well-rounded statue, but she was cut right out of ice. Oddly enough, she was talking about ice.
Have you ever heard of the Very necklace?
Can't say that I have.
Well, it's made of 12 perfectly matched diamonds, set in gold and platinum. It was stolen yesterday.
I think I get it. This company has insured it, huh?
Yes.
What do you expect me to do? Run out and get it back?
I hardly have that much faith in your capabilities, Mr. Kent.
Then why talk to me?
Well, it's said that you have many contacts in the underworld.
That's right. So what?
Just this. We're willing to pay £7,500 for the return of the necklace. No questions asked.
How much was it insured for?
75,000.
The crook could get 20 from a fence.
Yes, but he'd be taking the risk of being caught. This way, he collects and has no worries. And you could make yourself a tidy profit.
Then you don't care how much I keep for myself, huh?
We'll pay you £7,500 if you can arrange for the return of the necklace. The rest is up to you. Well?
When I collect, will you help me celebrate?
When and if you place that diamond necklace on my desk, the transaction will be completely finished.
Oh, what an awful shame.
Well, not as far as I'm concerned.
But think of 20 years from now. You won't have any memories.
And no regrets. Good morning, Mr. Kent.
Career girls always get me down. They spend the best years of their lives trying to prove they're as good as men. They end up looking like men.
The feminists, of course, would be outraged, but mind you, that was the 1950s and everybody thought like that back then. That voice was one of the best known in radio in its golden years. The voice, the star of the series, was Ken Wayne. Ken, how did you come to win that particular role?
Well, it was funny, Cal, because as a matter of fact, 2 other actors were tried out for it. And I was asked to play the part of the police sergeant, who was a sort of a semi-regular character. He came in about every 1 out of 3 or 4 episodes or something. So they did it once, and about a year went by and it didn't sell, and then we did it again suddenly with another actor, and Paul Jacklin, the producer, said, would you I want you to do this police sergeant again. And we did a second pilot, and of course all the time, well, I was listening carefully to the Larry Kent part, thinking I'd love to get my hands on this. I can't understand why this thing isn't, doesn't sell. So that was the second time. It didn't sell. About a year went by, and suddenly Paul Jacklin called me and he said, how would you like to play Larry Kent? And I said, well, I thought you'd never ask. I've been waiting to have a crack at it. So in those days, we did it on acetate. Discs was pre-tape. And I think it was a Thursday we cut the pilot. It was played to the sponsor the next day on the Friday, and it was bought immediately and on the air on Monday.
That's amazing.
And Jacklin said, we haven't got a scriptwriter. We haven't even got a second episode yet. Do you know anybody? And there happened to be a fellow, an American writer, who'd stayed here after the war. And I said, I know a fellow over in Macquarie. And he said, for God's sakes, tell him to come over and see me. And he came over, and off we went. And I think he wrote for about 5 or 6 years. And then an interesting thing happened. We changed writers, and we had Freddie Parsons, the famous comedy writer who used to write for Roy Reen, Moe, and George Wallace and the Tivoli and so on. And of course everybody was staggered that suddenly Freddie was a great dramatic writer as well.
Mind you, Larry Kent often had a lot of very smart responses, and I can see a comedy writer fitting into that role very well.
Sure. And the marvellous thing about Freddie was that because he'd been writing for particular performers, like Roy Reen and Wallace, as I say, he had that marvellous thing of suddenly studying an actor and the characterization he was doing and knowing, and we almost had a sort of a code, because Freddie would write a particular line, he'd hear me do something and he'd think, that's good, I can make introduce a little bit of a gag or something.
Yes.
And Freddie would write a line and I'd look at it and I'd say, I know exactly what Freddie wants me to do with this.
Yes, yes.
And we had that sort of a
that rapport is good, isn't it?
Marvellous, yeah. For a writer who writes for a particular person.
And what year was it that began?
That began in 49 and ran for 10 years, right up to 59, when I think that was the last show to go off the air when television then had started.
Right, it was 50 episodes a year back in those days, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So there was 500 programs you did, 52?
I think so, yeah.
Every week of the year.
Yeah.
We're listening today to episode 119, so that's fairly early in the third year, actually. So that was when it peaked very early, didn't it?
Well, yeah, the tag to that story is it was on the air on the Monday. We didn't even have a second episode written, and within a month it was rating about a 40 or something, which was, that's still a huge rating nowadays, isn't it?
It is indeed. In fact, you were telling me before that you succeeded in outrating the things that before then had been considered unbeatable, such as Australia's Amateur Hour.
Yes. Jack Davey, Bob Dyer, and the Amateur Hour, which I don't think had ever been outrated by anything else.
Yes.
I don't think it wasn't outrating it all the time, but it managed to top even the Amateur Hour, which, and I should have been rich.
Did they make you rich in those days, or did
No,
they simply pay you ordinary actors' fees?
They paid us very badly, and that was one of the troubles, and I think that was one of the reasons why in those days actors had to go overseas. You see, they had to get out of Australia because we were very badly ripped off, in fact.
In fact, the other thing that I noticed actors had to do was to do a lot of work.
Oh yeah, oh yes. Oh yes, you worked all day long. You worked in, that show took me 1 hour. It was a half-hour show. That's right, 1 hour.
To put it down on...
To put it down. And sometimes I might do 2, but that took 1 hour of 1 day a week. So I'd leave and go across the street to 2UE or somewhere else and do When a Girl Marries or some other, Superman or whatever.
Right.
So then you might be rehearsing a Sunday Lux Radio Theatre. So, of course, you had to do... literally,
in fact, I can remember as a small boy in short pants, I can remember hearing you do Larry Kent, and at the same time you were Grogan the Outlaw, chasing Smokey Dawson.
Yeah, there's a funny story. I was talking to old Smokey not long ago. I became Grogan the Big Heavy, the protagonist. And I was so evil and I committed so many crimes and so many murders that they finally had to bring me to justice, you see. Because I'd always escape when the gunfights with Smokey. And finally, they said he's got to go. And so I think I was shot and killed off by Smokey. This is interesting of the way radio was in those days. There was such an uproar from the listeners about Grogan being killed off, and so many phone calls and letters and what have you, that they decided they'd bring me back as his brother to avenge. Yeah.
I think that's wonderful. We'll be back with more of the golden years of radio after this break. In this hour of the golden years of radio, it's the Larry Kent story starring Ken Wayne. And I think what we might do before we talk a little more to Ken is to go back and find out what Larry Kent is up to.
There was a guy in Paddington called Frozen Fingers. He picked up the nickname because he handled so much ice. A little weasel of a man with a face that never stopped twitching.
Aye? Oh, well, what can I do for you, Kent?
The Very Diamond Necklace, ever hear of it?
Aye? Oh, my oath.
Who's got it?
Aye? Oh, I don't know.
Find out.
Oh, now you know me, Kent. That ain't my line.
I want to buy it, no questions asked. I'll start at 5,000 and I won't go any higher than 7. If it's 6,000 or less, you get 500, otherwise 300.
There's nothing funny in this, is there?
I'm working through the insurance company.
Oh, I get it. Yeah. Okay, Kent, I'll see what I can do for you.
Right, phone me tonight, I'll be home.
Good, Al. Give me till 11.
I said okay, drove back to the office. My visitor came in just before lunch. He was about 50, distinguished looking, well dressed. The kind of a character who wears fancy gloves on the hottest day in summer. He put a card on my desk. Richard Selwyn, solicitor.
My visit concerns the diamond necklace.
What diamond necklace?
The one owned by Mrs. Veary, of course.
Am I supposed to know anything about that?
Well, I saw you enter the claims division of the Paramount Insurance Company.
What were you doing there?
I was waiting to see Miss Lawrence.
Why?
To ask if she'd found out anything concerning the necklace.
Why should you want to know?
Mrs. Veary is a close friend of mine. In fact, when she suffered a nervous breakdown 6 months ago, I was given power of attorney over her estate.
So?
That diamond necklace means a lot to Mrs. Veary, quite apart from its value, and I'd like to see it returned.
Keep talking. I want to get your angle.
It's this, Mr. Kent. Mrs. Veary is dying. She can't possibly live more than a few months.
Go on.
It was she who discovered the theft of the necklace. She kept it in a safe in her bedroom.
Just a minute.
Yes?
According to what you say, she's an invalid.
Yes.
And how would she discover the necklace was missing?
She spends a few hours each day in a wheelchair.
Oh. Don't stop, Mr. Selwyn.
Well, to get to the point, Mr. Kent, I would like that necklace.
So would I.
Well, put it this way. I would rather you brought the necklace to me than to the Paramount Insurance Company.
What makes you so sure I'm supposed to bring it there?
I spoke to Miss Lawrence after you left. While she admitted nothing, I'd seen you leaving. The deduction is simple. She asked you to arrange a private deal for the necklace so the insurance company would save money.
And if she did?
I'll top her figure by, say, 3,000.
I still don't get your angle.
Well, it's simply this. Nothing would give me greater pleasure than to present Mrs. Veery with her necklace.
An expensive gift.
She's been very, very good to me. In the light of past favors, 10 or 12,000 means nothing. As I said, she's dying.
Yeah, but tell me something, Mr. Selwyn.
Yes?
Have the cops been notified?
No, but if the necklace isn't returned within a few days, they will be. When they are, an investigation will start, and our thief may decide to go underground with the necklace. He may hide it for months, even years. By then, Mrs. Veery will be dead.
Uh-huh.
12,000, Mr. Kent. Isn't that more than Miss Lawrence offered?
I'll have to think it over.
For how long?
I don't know. I'll keep your card. Maybe I'll phone you.
But...
Sorry, we'll have to leave it at that.
Oh, very well, Mr. Kent.
He left. I spent the rest of the day doing nothing. At 9, I was home. At 11, the phone rang. Larry Kent speaking.
Kent? Frozen fingers here.
What did you find out?
Oh, no, not a thing.
Did you see anybody?
Yeah, everybody, but nobody knew nothing.
Well, keep trying.
Oh, no, I know you, Kent. Must have been done by an outside operator. Town's dead. I'd just be wasting my time.
Sure of that?
Oh, yeah, positive.
Okay, Frozen Fingers, thanks. If Frozen Fingers couldn't make a deal for a stolen necklace, nobody could. You're wondering why I'd bargain with a crook, aren't you? Well, it's like this. When a fence gets his hands on a valuable diamond necklace, he has the stones recut. And he melts the metal. So it's better to make a deal, get the necklace back, and then get the crook your own way. But it looked as though I was stumped. I figured I'd hit the hay, but... company. I went to the door.
Hello?
She was something right out of a shipwrecked sailor's dream. Blonde, without any help from a chemist. Baby blue eyes, soft round face. A dress she'd been poured into, but she'd forgot to say when. A very nice bundle on anybody's doorstep. Only thing, she had a gun in her hand.
Don't worry. It's only for self-protection.
Come in. Maybe I can talk you into being sociable.
Please, don't try anything.
I'm tempted even with the gun. But you're evidently here on business.
That's right.
What can I do for you?
Today, there was a man who's called Frozen Fingers.
Yeah?
In certain circles, he was asking questions about a necklace. And he mentioned your name.
So?
Are you still interested in buying that necklace?
Yeah. Have you got it with you?
Hardly. But we can still make a deal.
We?
Me. And someone else.
When?
In 2 hours.
Where?
Hyde Park. Behind St. James Station.
That wouldn't give me enough time to get the dough.
You won't need it tonight. But I'll see you there, and I'll show you the necklace. Then we'll arrange for another meeting, and you can bring the money.
Fair enough.
See you in 2 hours. Until then, good night.
She backed out carefully. 2 hours. 1:20 a.m. I was there right on time. She wasn't. But somebody else was.
What will happen to Larry Kent? Time alone will tell. We'll take a break and then we'll come back with more of the golden years of radio. In this hour of the golden years of radio, it's the Larry Kent story starring Ken Wayne. Ken, your popularity in those days was phenomenal. What sort of fan mail did you get?
Oh, used to get a lot of stacks of fan mail. And you used to get into a lot of trouble too, because you'd have. I remember being stopped one day in Castlereagh Street, and a girl said, "Oh, you." She worked in some factory somewhere or something, and she said, "Oh, you were out last night. My girlfriend was out with you last night." And I said, "Oh, is that right?" And she said, "Yes," and her name was so-and-so. And of course it didn't mean anything to me. But this girl apparently had gone into and said that she'd been out with me the night before, and painted this lurid picture of...
the price of stardom.
Yeah. So it had weird... we had one thing I remember, because one of the innovative things about the show was, in those days, all the radio shows and all the series that we used to do, soapies and so on, were all American scripts. They'd buy them from America. And they were all set in some mythical American town, and everything was done with American accents, because, you know, Australians were still had a complex about anything local had to be second rate, second best. We were the first ones. We took the script and then adapted it to Sydney. So I was saying things like I jumped in a cab and went to Double Bay, or I was up in Paddington, and so on. And I even used to mention real people, you know, blokes around the cross that I knew.
Real restaurants too. I remember in one episode mentioning Romanos, I think, or Princes or somewhere.
Yeah, people were identifying with that. Prior to that, I think the only Australian thing was Dad and Dave or something. Everything else it had to be British or American. And I remember one instance of I said something like, "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow on the steps of the GPO in Martin Place." And the publicity department said, "Might be a good idea for you to go down, and we'll get a picture." And they said, "Now, in case nobody turns up, we'll take half a dozen girls from the office, and we'll take a picture of you with the girls." So I got down there about 5 minutes before the time we'd said, 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock. And the George Street was jammed with thousands of people, and they were running into the GPO and grabbing the telegram forms for me to sign, and grabbed me by the collar, and I was hauled away because the traffic was being stopped in George Street. Yeah, I've got a picture of that, in fact.
That's amazing, the power of radio in those days to stop the traffic. Listen, we'll talk a little more about it in a moment, Ken, but I want to stop for the moment because I'm worried about what's happening to Larry Kent. The last time we heard from him, he was being shot at.
I dropped after hearing the first shot. When the second one went off, my face was against the sidewalk. I was holding out my gun. I saw the flash of the third, but I didn't even bother to shoot. Why? Because it came from 100 yards away. To hit anybody at 300 feet with a revolver, you've got to be Annie Oakley or lucky enough to win the lottery. I got up and started running. My man was gone, if it had been a man. I went too, not wanting to talk to the cops at that stage. For a couple of hours that night, I lay in bed thinking. First thing in the morning, the phone book gave me an address. That's where I went, to the Veery place.
Private detective?
She was young, in her middle 20s. Brown hair, good profile. Right from the floor.
Please come in.
Thanks.
I'm June Veery. Mrs. Veery is my aunt.
Uh-huh. Can I see her?
I'm afraid that's impossible. She's not well at all.
But I've come about the necklace.
Oh, do you know something about it?
Not as much as I'd like to know.
I don't understand.
I told her how the Paramount Insurance Company had hired me, but I left out the rest.
I see. But Aunt Grace couldn't help you.
You never can tell. I'd just like to ask her some questions.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kent. The doctor's just been. Aunt Grace has been so upset about the necklace. The doctor gave her something.
Oh.
But perhaps I can help you.
Yeah, maybe you can.
What do you want to know?
Oh, a lot of little things that may not mean anything. First, who's Richard Selwyn?
Why, he's Aunt Grace's solicitor.
Good friend?
Well, they've known each other for 20 years.
Do you like him?
He's always been very nice to me.
Do you live here?
Yes.
All your life?
Only for the past 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
since my parents died.
Get along with your aunt?
I'm very fond of her.
I'll bet that goes both ways.
Yes.
Now that necklace, I guess it means a lot to your aunt.
It was given to her by her husband. He died soon after they were married.
No children?
No.
The necklace is insured for $75,000, right?
Yes.
What value would your aunt place on it right now?
There's no value as far as she's concerned. All the money in the world wouldn't have bought that necklace.
But everything has a price, June.
Mr. Kent, my aunt is dying. The necklace was given to her by her husband. Can't you see what that means?
I had a general idea, but I wanted to be sure. Thanks.
You're going now?
Yeah.
Mr. Kent, do you think you can get that necklace?
Yeah. Next stop, Frozen Fingers' room in Paddington. Out. Skeleton key. It worked. The place looked bare. I had to look around. Nothing in his cupboard. Nothing anywhere. Frozen Fingers had packed up and hit the road. Why? Another trip. This time outside somebody's house. Then a tail job. But nothing happened. At least nothing I was looking for. The next day, ditto. But the third day, results. My tail job took me to an apartment building. When my tail job left, I entered. 2 dames on the directory in the hall, Miss M. Blake, Miss R. Fleming. I tried Miss Fleming. She was thin, hawk-nosed. Sorry, I said, wrong flat. Then I tried M. Blake.
You?
Yeah. Oh, you shouldn't have tried keeping me out.
I'll
I
scream.
used to sell vacuum cleaners.
I tell you, I'll scream.
Open your mouth wide enough to try it and I'll flatten you.
What do you want?
First, just to be sociable, what does the M stand for in your name?
You're the private detective. Pig!
Listen, sweetheart. Hitting dames isn't my specialty. But when they try to make you imitate a duck in a shooting gallery, it's different. Now, M is what?
Millie.
That's the girl. From now on, my questions will be more important. What's so funny?
You. The great private detective.
I was good enough to track you down. Through your partner.
But that's as far as you'll get. You got nothing on us.
There were the 3 shots fired at me.
You're the only one who's sure they weren't backfires.
There's Frozen Fingers. He knows something.
But he's not here.
What did you do with him?
We sent him on a holiday. He's perfectly all right.
Thanks, sweetheart. That makes the picture complete.
But you still can't do anything. Not a thing. Mr. Kent.
I could tie you up and then gag your pretty mouth.
That'd be silly, wouldn't it?
It'd keep you from using that telephone. So just relax, sweetheart, and don't struggle.
Don't make it too tight.
I'll try not to. That telephone flex ought to do the trick.
Yes.
I pulled the telephone wire from the wall. Walked over to the phone. Then she moved.
You!
She grabbed an ashtray, threw it. I lifted my arm. My left arm went numb.
I won't miss again.
She never got the chance to try.
Oh.
Nice and gentle, I tapped her on a nerve just below the left ear. Then I tied her. Gagged her. Made sure she was comfortable on the couch. She came to just as I finished. So long, sweetheart. Nice kid, Millie.
Well, we'll find out what's happened to Millie and what happens to Larry Kent a bit later. That program had a lot of innovations in it, didn't it, Ken?
Yes, it did. That was part of its big success. Firstly, in those days, all the soapies, they bought most of them from America, and then local writers would adapt them. But they were all set in some mystical American town. Or I was walking down the street in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And people still had a complex about, setting a play. Nobody's going to be interested in something that's set in Australia. So we, of course, used to had the character of Larry Kent set in Sydney, and I used to say things like, I got a cab and went to Double Bay, or I'll meet you at Martin Place, or so on. And I used to often use real people's names, people I knew.
But as well as that, it was also innovative in terms of technique, wasn't it?
That's right. In those days, firstly, I used to work on a microphone by myself, and the rest of the cast would be on another microphone.
And the standard thing was for all the actors and actresses to stand around a single mic, wasn't it?
Single mic, yeah.
Yes.
Because I was doing the first-person narration. Now that was something new, so that the audience were being taken with me. As I said, I walked down I climbed up the stairs and knocked on the door, and bum bum bum, and the door opened, and there she was. So the audience, it's a first-person narration. Plus, another thing, that producers were terribly frightened of dead air. You're not supposed to pause. You had to keep talking because it was a radio. And we introduced, now that may sound now even slightly stylized, but it was. And we did whole scenes with just monosyllabic dialogue, with pauses, not a lot of... So the listener creates their own picture in their mind. And they're not just... Everything isn't explained to them. There are whole scenes there where I'm saying, yeah, and what happened then? Uh-huh. And, that was new, because radio producers were terrified of pauses on the air. But a pause can be as alive as a word, if, you're allowing the audience to create their own images.
We'll be back with more of the Golden Years of Radio after this break. On this hour of the Golden Years of Radio, it's The Larry Kent Story, starring Ken Wayne. Ken, where did that distinctive and striking voice come from? Were you just born with it? Did you develop it?
No, I didn't develop it, because nobody ever hears their own voice, do they? I remember my first show, the first job I did in radio was for Grace Gibson, and I was very excited about it. And I went home, and it was a couple of weeks later before it came on the air, and here it was, and I sat down and I started to listen to the show. And I didn't come in for a long time and didn't have a big part. And I thought, here I come. The door opened and in I came, and I thought, oh my God, I don't sound like that. Everybody else sounds...
Yes.
And of course the same thing happens when you see yourself on the screen. Everybody else looks normal. So you never hear yourself. The American thing's easy for me. I've been I was away overseas for a long time, and I've been playing American parts in American movies in Europe. And why it's easy for me, some accents are easy for some actors and others are...
Sure.
I can't do Scots.
Right.
You could offer me $1,000, I can't do a Scots accent. But I have, for some reason, an American delivery.
Yes, to do with pace and feeling and so on.
Yeah, so that's I think why
that
acting? Sort of style of thing is easy.
Why acting? How did you enter the acting profession in the first place?
Well, I wanted to do that right from the time I was a kid. I started when I was a kid. I started when I was about 11 or 12. And I started with Ken Hall out at the old...
Ken G. Hall
out of the old Cine Sound Studios. Pete Finch was a young, juvenile actor then. And in the old Cine Sound Studios at Bondi Junction. And then I did the very, very successful picture called Sons of Matthew.
Yes, Michael Pate was in that.
Excuse me, Michael Pate, as a matter of fact, at the moment, has a script that he's just been working on for a long time, and he's trying to set up a remake of something he's going to do a remake.
What a nice idea.
Yeah, yeah. I was talking to him the other day, and he was telling me, and he was saying how great my part, Barney was my character, and he's written the part of Barney, and it's a terrific, and he does this and he does that, and I said, shut up, don't tell me anymore, because I can't play it, and, you know.
Yes. Mind you, the one thing that doesn't change with the years is the voice. The voice sounds to me now exactly the way it did in those days.
Yes, it does, yeah. Well, it's funny for me listening to those excerpts there, because it's like I can't identify with it. It's like listening to somebody else. You know, you're so far removed that you can be completely objective, and it's like listening to another person. It's strange.
What I'd like to do at this stage
Stands up well, though, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
After all
they
these
still
years.
work well. What I'd like to do at this stage is to find out the solution to the mystery. Let's
Right.
go back to Larry Kent.
Next move. Second story work. A complete search. Success. Then out to the Veery place, a question.
Yes, my aunt is awake.
Good, now listen, June. Answer it, June.
All right.
Good afternoon, June.
Hello, Mr. Selwyn.
Well, why the urgent call?
I wanted to see you, Selwyn.
Mr. Kent.
Still interested in that necklace?
Why, yes, of course I am.
For 12,000?
Why, yes. Do you know where it is?
Uh-huh.
Who has it?
Before I get to that, there are just a few questions.
Questions?
Why did you want me to get you the necklace?
Why, so I can get it back to Mrs. Veery, of course. I know how much it means to her.
Have you got the 12,000?
I can raise it. If you can prove you can get the necklace.
In other words, you were sure you'd never have to raise it.
I beg your pardon?
You guessed I was on the case when you saw me at the insurance building.
Why, yes, I told you that.
You knew my methods, my reputation. You didn't want me suspecting you.
Suspecting me?
Yeah, here's the necklace, Selwyn.
Where did you get it?
In your apartment, very cleverly hidden under a floorboard.
That's a lie.
You stole it.
Why would I steal it and then go to you?
To throw suspicion away from yourself.
That's crazy.
You're a lawyer. You've got contacts in the underworld. From one, you found out Frozen Fingers was working for me, so you paid him off. When I discovered he was missing, it would make me think he was on the inside of the deal.
Do you think you can prove any of this rot?
We might be able to make Millie talk.
Millie?
Don't play dumb. The girlfriend, the dame who was working with you, who probably thinks you're going to marry her after Mrs. Veery put you in her next will.
That's a lie.
You saw Mrs. Veery's will when you had power of attorney. But you weren't getting as much as you wanted.
I never saw any will.
That's not true, Richard.
Mrs. Veery.
The old girl, thin-faced, weak, was in the doorway of the next room in a wheelchair.
When you had power of attorney, Richard, you took all my important papers, including the will.
My dear, you are not well. You should be in your room. You might catch a chill.
Never mind that. You needn't pretend you worry about me.
Oh, but I do, Mrs. Veery. Oh, please, you mustn't listen to what he's saying. It's a whole pack of lies.
I've seen the truth in your eyes, Richard. And Mr. Kent has told me everything.
It's not true. It's not true.
You knew how much that necklace meant to me.
Then why would I take it?
So you could give it back, saying you'd made a deal for it. Then Mrs. Veery would show her appreciation by drawing up a new will.
Yes, and I would have too. In your favor, Richard. Now, however, you get nothing.
I think he should get something, Aunt Grace.
So do I.
Oh, God.
I threw him out. Later, I had June phone the Paramount Insurance Company. Then I went to see Miss Ruth Lawrence, the iceberg.
Congratulations, Mr. Kent.
Thanks, honey.
Miss Lawrence, if you don't mind.
Uh-huh.
I suppose you feel entitled to a bonus.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have a check made out to you.
That part of the bonus can wait.
Mr. Kent, your arm.
I'm gambling
I warn you.
on the fact that you might be human.
Mr. Kent, I insist that you...
Now, that wasn't bad, was it?
Please, please don't try that again.
Like this?
Mr. Kent.
still mad?
Mad? What have I been doing with my life?
Fellas, here's a tip. When you start an iceberg melting, watch out. Good night.
He never missed out on the women, and he always solved the mysteries. He was an amazing character. Did you like Larry Kent? How did you feel about him, Ken?
Yes, because he was not. He wasn't a Superman. You know, he didn't. We introduced, even before all the things that all the Bond movies and everything have done since, sex, which was then pretty. As a matter of fact, I remember the show was banned in New Zealand. They wouldn't have it down there. It was too rude.
I'm not surprised. We know about New Zealand.
And sex and crime and action and so on. We always assumed that the character, because I was too young to play it visually, we always assumed the character was probably in his 40s, early 40s maybe.
And you were in your 20s at the time.
Yeah, and a bit jaded, seen it all, The character was... we justified it being an American because, as I say, at that time, everything was being done. That he was a guy who was been in Australia during the war and decided to settle, which a lot of Americans did. So that made... and what I liked about it was he used to get beaten up and he didn't always score, and, so he was human. He wasn't a Superman.
Ken Wayne, thank you for being with us this hour, and thank you for the great Larry Kent character. Thank you for being part of the golden years of radio.